and welcome. We have a great show planned for you all today, featuring many special guest speakers from around the world. We know you'll all enjoy it. First up is the one and only President Truman.
Hi there, thanks for having me.
We're so glad you could come. I have to ask you first, what is this Truman Doctrine all about?
In the speech I gave on March 12th. Wait a second, didn't you say you had a clip of that?
As a matter of fact, we do.
The United States must supply this assistance. We have already extended to Greece certain types of relief and economic aid, but these are inadequate. There is no other country to which democratic Greece can turn. No other nation is willing and able to provide the necessary support for a democratic Greek government.
Yes, I made it clear that we would support Greece and Turkey with economic and military aid to prevent us from falling to the Soviet sphere.
Wow, what a great idea, especially considering the boundary changes of the Second World War. Any thoughts on that?
As you may know, Korea became independent as it was originally part under Soviet, part U.S. administration. The remainder of Germany was split into two, East and West Germany. Taiwan and Manchuria and the others were Japanese occupied, and China went back to China.
Those are some pretty big changes.
Yes, they greatly influenced Europe.
So containment, I always get a little fuzzy on that. Can you sum that up for us?
Of course, it's the idea of supporting the countries of the borderline of falling under Soviet communism. By helping to restore the countries from post-war destruction, we keep them strong enough to resist the threat of communism.
Wow, that certainly sounds effective. It looks like that's all the time we have. Thank you so much for coming in. It was a pleasure to have you, Mr. President.
Of course.
Ike for president, Ike for president, Ike for president. You like Ike, I like Ike. Everybody likes Ike for president. Hang out the banner, beat the drum. We'll take Ike to Washington. We don't want John or Dean or Harry. Let's do that big job right. Let's get.
Hello there.
Good afternoon, President Kenny. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, just fine.
Perfect. Okay, so let's get down to business. Would you mind explaining what exactly happened during the Cuban Missile Crisis to us?
Certainly. The threat of missiles was at its crescendo. We also had missiles located in Turkey, and the Soviets had missile sites under construction in Cuba. At the time, the Bay of Pigs incident had just happened, and our struggle with Cuba was also at its peak. U.S. security was at risk due to the range of missiles, so we had to act quickly. There were two possible removal options, a surgical airstrike or a blockade.
So which did you choose?
Blockade has a warlike connotation, which we were avoiding, so we called it a quarantine. The Soviets were not happy with our missiles in Turkey, so we negotiated a deal. We would remove our missiles from Turkey if the Soviets would agree to remove theirs from Cuba.
So did that solve the problem?
Yes, in fact, the tensions subsided between the Soviets and us.
Then that was some nice negotiating. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you all so much. I'm glad I could be of service.
Joining us next is President Johnson.
Hey, how's everyone doing today?
It's great to have you.
Thanks. First, I have to ask, did everyone see the mission on the moon last night? It was pretty cool.
It was. NASA sure showed those Soviets with getting Mr. Aldrin on the moon and all.
Yes, I'm sure everyone has seen the photo of President Kennedy in the new NASA facilities taken a few years ago. NASA has continued to amaze us, first with sending Mr. Alan Shepard into space back in '61, and the orbit of the Earth in '62 by our very own John Glenn.
Yes, they are very impressive. And as much as I would like to discuss this various space missions with you, I must insist we talk about your efforts towards civil rights.
Oh yes, of course, it has been my mission to bring equality to all the country. It's a slow and painful process, but we will get there someday. So far, I have been passed bills to desegregate all public facilities, voting, and employment.
It is a very difficult process, you're right, but you're doing a fine job. If we work together as a country, we can get the job done.
The complications in Vietnam made it even more difficult. It's hard to direct an appropriate amount of attention to both our domestic and foreign affairs.
What complications?
Well, it seems that containment just isn't working for us anymore. I've sent more troops over in hopes of overpowering the communists, but it doesn't seem to be working. Our taxpayers are giving more money to help the cause. We need more support from both Congress and the public if we intend to win. That is why I announced the Tonkin Gulf story to our people, although even that doesn't seem to be making a difference.
Perhaps we should just pull out entirely. But I'll leave the foreign affairs to you, Mr. President. It looks like we're out of time, but it was a pleasure to have you, and thank you for your time.
It was a pleasure, was all mine.
Next up, we have Joseph Stalin. Welcome. It's so great to have you.
Thank you.
So first off, I think we should all get a round of applause for Mr. Stalin for helping us in World War II. Tell me, was communism beneficial to your country in war?
Communism is the only way.
As you all know, after the close of World War II, once we had used our atomic bomb, we entered a Cold War with the Soviets. Stalin, can you tell me anything about the origins of this?
Of course, it emerged because we were worried with the introduction of the nuclear weapons in the U.S. that other countries would develop them also. You Americans also gained intelligence that denoted a hydrogen bomb that seemed to cause some chaos. We began producing nuclear weapons, and it led to an arms race with the U.S.
So why do you think it got so out of hand and escalated? We were allies earlier.
The U.S. knew other countries were prepared for nuclear production, so the worry over a dominating war power was combined to the two of us. The containment you tried with us was also quite annoying.
Thank you for such detailed explanations. I'm afraid it is now time to cut to a commercial break, but stay right there and we'll be back with a little girl from West Berlin. I began my reign by denouncing Stalin's purges and began the de-Stalinization of the Soviet Union. My rule was the most tense portion of the Cold War, culminating in the Cuban Missile Crisis. Supporting me is supporting a new chapter in the Soviet Union. We're back live with Helga. She's a 6-year-old girl from West Berlin who has first-hand experience with the Marshall Plan. Let's all give her a big round of applause.
Hello, danke für die Einladung. Thanks for having me.
Can you tell me a little bit about the Marshall Plan, about how it's affected you and your family and your life?
It's done a lot of good for us in West Berlin. The main objective is to bring aid to Europe, specifically Germany, for the rebuilding. I think it's also meant to show off to the Soviets. The Soviets are so mean to the poor people in East Berlin. They won't even let the Americans drop little candies out of their planes for their children. For me, the plan has given me food, toys, and hope. Germany was a scary place after the war. The plan makes everyone happy and helps them start over.
That was a very nice description, Helga. Thank you for sharing that and for visiting with me. Next, we have a veteran of the Cold War here with us to tell us a little bit about their job in the war. Thank you so much for your valiant service.
Yes, ma'am, just doing my job.
Could you tell our student audience what exactly our role in the war was? Defending our freedom, if you will.
Well, this was the first Cold War, because no actual combat took place. It was a series of threats. This was the first ever appearance of nuclear weapons, and people at home really didn't know how to prepare or what to do if an actual attack ensued. Us soldiers had to be on call at all times. It definitely produced a lot of anxiety, but nothing we weren't ready or training for.
I know the American people are so thankful for all your service. Stuck in a rut? These are all complimentary to your home bomb shelter.
It's safe.
See, it comes with a water bottle.
And it's patriotic.
And your favorite beverage?
Get a spill?
Towels are complimentary.
My fellow Americans, I come before you tonight as a candidate for the vice presidency. Now, the usual political thing to do when charges are made against you is to either ignore them or to deny them without giving details. I believe we've had enough of that in the United States, and I feel that the people have got to have confidence in the integrity of the men who run for that office and who might obtain it.
Welcome. How are you?
Can't complain. How about yourself?
Doing just fine, President Ford. Now, can you tell us anything about what you've done to limit nuclear arms and what you've done to work towards peace?
Of course, in November I met in Vladivostok, and the USSR progress was made toward a comprehensive 10-year pact for curbing offensive nuclear weapons. I also reached an agreement with Brezhnev to limit the number of offensive nuclear weapons. Then in May, we signed a treaty on underground nuclear explosives. One of my most significant moves toward the peace was pulling our troops out of Vietnam.
I can only imagine how difficult of a decision it was to pull our troops out of Vietnam, especially after all those years of containment. Thank you for coming in.
Of course, I appreciate you having me today.
Okay, next up we have President Jimmy Carter. Unfortunately, he had a previous engagement, but we were able to steal him away for a few moments for a brief video call. Hello.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Okay, Mr. President, I know we have a time budget, so let's make this to the point. What was your foreign policy going into office, and concerning China and the Soviet Union?
I'm so glad you asked. I emphasize human rights as a top priority in regards to other countries. I believe that each country should have free liberties and the individual should be from the arbitrary power of the state. In regard to the Soviet Union, it brings me back to my thought of forced isolation. If we can isolate them from China by befriending the Chinese and building a truly honest and strong friendship, we can slowly bring it down. I'm afraid that's all I have time for today. Thank you for having me, and I hope everyone enjoys their day.
As a fellow performer, I, Madonna, endorse Ronald Reagan as president.
Vote for me, Ronald Reagan, if you want lower taxes, economic stimulation through my policy of Reaganomics, and reduced inflation. If elected, I can promise a new war on drugs. I will protect our country from the Soviet Union by building up our armaments and through negotiations with Gorbachev. I will do my best to end the Cold War and bring safety back to the U.S., so vote for me. Well, guys, that's our show. We hope we were helpful in helping everyone understand America from 1945 to 1993. A special thank you to all our amazing guests and to all our viewers for tuning in. See you guys next time on The Sienna Show.
Today.
Please, have a seat.
Oh!
Pleasure to have you, and thank you for your time.
It was a pleasure. It was all mine. What's What's that to say?
It was a pleasure, was all mine.
Oh, yes, of course.
Keep going, no, stop. Thank you for sharing that and visiting with me. Okay, let me redo that.
Facilities taken a few years ago. NASA has continued to amaze us, first by sending Mr. Alon Shepard
Johnson.
the Yankee for the Angelong. Thanks for having me. Treaty on underground nuclear explosives. One of my most significant moves toward peace was pulling in our troops out of Vietnam.
Just put that in the blooper reel. Get a shot of it really quick. Just gonna put it in the blooper reel shot. Hold that up.
Okay, go.
I began my... What are you gonna do?